Konnichiwa, a very good afternoon from all of us here from Wakayama University. I hope you've enjoyed that video of our university. You could see the various different departments and also the one that I am also working for, which is the Center for Tourism Research. And so my name is Husna Zainal Abidin. I am a lecturer here at the university, and I am delighted to be sharing with you and welcoming you to our first ever program for the Japanese language and cultural program. So we do hope that perhaps in the future you would be able to join all of us here in this wonderful place of Wakayama and be able to experience the Japanese culture and also language physically here. But even though there is a pandemic, we are very enthusiastic to still continue in sharing with you all of the culture here. And so I would like to welcome all of you. I know that there are over 100 participants who registered to our program today and coming from over about 8 different countries. So I would like to welcome you in the different languages. So please excuse if I did pronounce it differently. So hello, konnichiwa, and assalamu alaikum. Selamat tengah hari, dobro jutro, hola, ni hao, annyeonghaseyo, xin chao, and sawadee. So I am very, very pleased to be able to be welcoming you in the opening ceremony. And here today, I hope you'll be able to enjoy the whole week in the different programs that we will have. And without further ado, I would like to welcome our president, President Ito, to be giving his opening remarks.
皆さん、和歌山大学が提供する夏季履修プログラムに参加していただき、ありがとうございます。こんにちは。私は和歌山大学学長の伊藤千尋です。このプログラムは、日本を探索するために必要な基礎的な日本語の会話と、和歌山で体験できる日本文化を紹介するものです。短いプログラムですから、なかなか日本の文化の深さを伝えることはできませんが、このプログラムを見て、皆さんが日本へ来たいと思うことができるのであれば、嬉しく思います。和歌山大学は、日本語と日本文化を中核として世界との交流を続けることにしています。これからも面白い日本文化を紹介していきますので、今後も期待してください。
Thank you, President Ito. And as he mentioned, we are truly enthusiastic to be sharing with you the different aspects of Japanese culture. Although it is a very short program, I hope that it will give you some insights and understanding. And following President Ito, we have our Director of Center for Japanology Studies, Professor Nagatomo, to be giving her welcoming speech.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wakayama University's 2022 summer program. My name is Nagatomo Ayako. I'm a professor here at Wakayama University. As the director of Center for Japanology Studies, I want to thank you all for your participation in this program and to wish you much learning success as you begin this 5-day course. I am very excited as this is the first time for Wakayama University to offer intensive courses in the Japanese language and in the Japanese culture online. We hope it will be a fun and rewarding experience for everyone. Although this is only a 5-day course, we'll do our best to help your progress in your studies and to enrich your understanding of Japan and Japanese language. We hope this is the just start of a longer association with our program and its teachers, and that in the future we'll see you on campus and in person someday. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nagatomo Sensei. And we are also, I'd like to highlight that Wakayama University is a very welcoming university, especially to international students and people. As you can see, I am here as a staff working for the Center for Tourism Research, exploring the various aspects of Japanese culture and also tourism management. And so let's look into this week's schedule. But before that, before we delve into the different activities that we'll be doing in the different days, I would also like to share with you the videos of our instructors, and that will be showcasing also the internationalization of Japan and Wakayama University.
Hello everyone, my name is Keiko, in charge of your Japanese class. So in this course, we will learning about talking about your introduction or your families or dishes, your favorite food or dishes, etc. So please let's try talk about various things in Japanese. And also our university students also help support our course. So let's try talking about various things with them. So see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Minasan konnichiwa. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Joseph Chia. I'm a researcher here at the Center for Tourism Research at Wakayama University. I will be talking to you on day one about tourism and culture, and especially tourism and Japanese culture. For example, what you see above my head are kokeshi dolls. These are traditional Japanese wooden dolls and one of my greatest passions in Japan. There are many other cultural items of interest here in Japan. For example, in this book about Japanese kokeshi dolls, it's a wealth of knowledge about how there is a link between arts, culture, and tourism. So, I look forward to seeing you next week, and thank you again for joining us.
Hello everybody, my name is Nicolas Progano and I'm a lecturer here at Wakayama University. During the summer program, I will be in charge of the class about Wakayama history and culture, so I'm looking forward to meeting you there. Thank you very much.
Konnichiwa everyone, my name is Husna Zainal Abidin and I'm a lecturer here at the Center for Tourism Research. I will be joining in your summer program next week to share with you all of the various different interesting experiences that I have had here in Japan, and I'm sure that all of you would be very keen to learn from them. So without further ado, I'll see you guys soon.
Hello everyone, I'm Kumiko Jacobson from International Engagement Division. I'm so excited to welcome you and share the Japanese culture with you. See you on Thursday!
はじめまして。Good afternoon. My name is Sheikh Fahmi Izzuddin and you can call me Shadow. I'm from Malaysia and currently Wakayama University student. And let's meet on Wednesday and talk a lot about Japanese. See you soon.
Konnichiwa. My name is Ame and you must call me Ame. And I'm looking forward to see you guys. See you soon.
Hi guys and girls. My name is Nazrin. I'm from Malaysia. I also studying in Japan. It's been only 2 months I'm here. So I'm looking forward to see you guys in this program. Hope you enjoy.
Konnichiwa. Hello. I'm Tatsuta Yoshimasa. I'm Wakayama University student. Please enjoy. Let's talk a lot. If we can, in Japanese. See you.
Hi, I'm Ma from Faculty of Economics, Wakayama University. Please look forward for the learning and can't wait to see you guys soon. Hello, I'm Sarah. I'm looking forward to meeting you guys this Wednesday and Thursday. See you!
So as you see, all of us are a bunch of friendly and welcoming people. So I do hope that throughout this whole week, you'll be able to also engage and interact with us either through the video. And talking about video, I can see how many of you switched on your video, and I really appreciate it to be able to see your faces. And I can see some in the evening and in the morning. I appreciate that you are able to join us today. And it might seem like in the video that Wakayama is full of Malaysians, but no, there are various different students from different countries. We have those from Korea, China, Uzbekistan, Brazil, and even Ukraine. I can't remember all of it from the top of my mind, but we do have representation from multiple different countries. And I'm sure that you will also be able to relate to the different challenges or cultural experiences that we will share throughout this whole week. And talking about this, the schedule, we will now look at the schedule that we have for this week. So for Monday, today, we will have Tourism and Culture by Professor Dr. Joseph Chia. He is very passionate about the Japanese culture. He truly enjoys kokeshi, which is the wooden dolls, and he has a lot of collections. You can even please do ask him more questions about that. And then he is also really into onsen culture. I'm not sure if you are aware of that, which is the sauna. And please do ask him all of the questions that you have in mind, because that's not really a culture in some other parts of the world, right? But it is definitely a huge part of the Japanese culture here. And then on Tuesday, we will be joined by Dr. Nicholas Pregano. He is also a lecturer here. He will talk about the Wakayama historical and culture. So he has been here and exploring and researching specifically on Wakayama and the historical aspects, particularly on pilgrimage. As you may know, Wakayama is the heart of spirituality, as they say, here in Japan. So it is a very calming and spiritually connected place. And he will be sharing with you the different aspects of Wakayama and also Japan, which I hope one day in the future you will be able to visit. And then on Wednesday, we will have the Survival Japanese for the first hour, and later me, Nicholas, and Joseph will be sharing with you our insights into the Japanese life, or more of our experience here in Japan as a foreigner. As you can see, we're all from various different countries, and there will be different cultural differences, some mistakes, some funny experiences, and I hope you'll be able to learn from our experiences. That will be on Wednesday. Then on Thursday, we will have a Survival Japanese again, and then cooking by our amazing Miss Jacobson Kumiko. She's such a sweet and lovely person. I think you're going to enjoy her session. Please do prepare your cooking ingredients. And even if you are unable to cook, please feel free. I hope you'll be able to join and actually have a one-to-one or more of like a direct interaction with our Kumiko sensei on a cooking class. And here, even at our Center for Tourism Research and the university, we often have cooking sessions, which I thoroughly enjoy. And then lastly, on Friday, we will have Survival Japanese again, and then we will end the program with another mini ceremony. So that will be our program for the week. I hope that you will be able to engage by messaging us on the chat or also through the video and audio. We're very keen to hearing your thoughts, and we would really love to have you come and visit us here at Wakayama University someday in the future. And so this remarks the end of our ceremony. I really appreciate you for joining us in this opening ceremony, and I hope you'll have a wonderful experience. But it will not end for today. Next up, we will have our Professor Joseph Chia to be talking about tourism and culture. We will have a very quick break, which is 10-minute break, and we will resume back here at 3:30 p.m. Japanese time. So that's just 10 minutes, okay, guys? So quickly go and refreshen yourself and come back. And yes, see you in a bit.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you can all hear me. I can see some of you, but not all of you. Welcome back. I hope you had a good break. My name is Joseph Chia, and I'm a professor of tourism here at the Center for Tourism Research at Wakayama University. So thank you all for joining me for this second session. Now, some of you are probably wondering, this guy looks Japanese, but he doesn't sound Japanese, right? You will be correct. I'm an Australian, and I've been working in Japan for the last, here at Wakayama University, for 4 years now. So this section on tourism and culture is something that I look forward to talking to you about, because it's a lot of what my work is about. I have some slides that I will share with you, and then at the end of my presentation, what I hope to do is have some questions from you if you have any questions. Perhaps you may want to put questions in the chat box, or perhaps you may want to ask me the question directly. So I look forward to having a discussion with you. So the issue of culture is a really, really important one for the work I do, and I think for all of you as well, right? I assume that all of you in Uzbekistan, in Serbia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Brazil, China, Korea, and Thailand are all interested in Japanese culture. And you come to Japanese culture through the Japanese language, right? So I understand fully. What I will talk about today reflects on the work that I do in cultural tourism, but I also want to talk to you about my own experiences as a foreigner living and working in Japan and experiencing Japanese culture. Because I think for most of you who come to this seminar, you are either learning Japanese, you are very interested in Japanese culture because of the books, films, music, food, and other cultural aspects that you are familiar with. So hopefully I'll be able to talk about some of those things in today's session. So let me share my slides with you first, and then we will continue this conversation. So if you have any questions while I'm doing this, please feel free to write them down, and then perhaps we can discuss them later on. So thank you to all of those of you who've made the time to join us. I think our Brazilian colleagues are probably asleep as we speak and will be watching the recorded presentation. But nevertheless, I thank all of you. So as part of this summer program, I was asked to talk about the links between tourism and culture. And for those of you in the countries that you're from, in Indonesia, Thailand, Uzbekistan, China, Serbia, tourism is also a big part of your own country's economies and a big part of the way people understand your own cultures. So through tourism, we are able to get a good understanding of culture that belongs to a people and place. Also, for many of you, you're probably looking to come to Wakayama at some point to study Japanese, to be familiar with Japanese culture. So hopefully by the end of this presentation, you cannot wait to come to Wakayama. You will be so interested to come that you will be here very, very soon. So tourism and culture, what has this got to do with the study of Japanese language and the study of Japanese Japanology, as we term it here at the newly formed Center for Japanology Studies. So let's go to my next slide. Now I just need to find, okay. So just a little bit about me. As I said earlier, I'm a professor at the Center for Tourism Research here. I'm also an adjunct professor at Auckland University in New Zealand and visiting professor in Malaysia at UCSI, but we don't have any Malaysians in the audience. I also write about tourism and tourism geographies. As you can see from my next slide, the books that I've written talk about tourism, but culture is often at the very heart of all of this. When we talk about tourism in any country, the reason people want to go to a country is because of the culture, its people, its food, its lifestyle, its music, and all of the reasons why you are interested in coming to Japan. For me, my own interest in Japan stems from all of the things that you're probably interested in. I love Japanese film. I love Japanese music, even though my Japanese is very terrible. And for the most part, I don't know what they're singing about. My inspiration for coming to Japan is Studio Ghibli. Most of you would know Studio Ghibli, right? It's one of the biggest things that I enjoy about Japan. And when I came to Japan, it was a case of, to what extent did my impressions and expectations of Japan match with the reality? And I will talk about this later, because for many of you, you're probably asking yourself that question. What is life like in Japan? Are Japanese people friendly? Will I be able to get by in Japan, even with very basic Japanese skills, Japanese language skills? Will Japanese people be interested in what I have to say? How does someone like me fit into Japanese society? So with that said, I want to firstly talk about tourism and culture and where we are today. For most of you, as you know, perhaps you may have wanted to come to Japan much earlier than this, maybe in 2020, 2021, or 2022. But of course, you haven't been able to visit Japan, right? Because of coronavirus, the Japanese borders have been closed. And even though some restrictions are being lifted, it's still very difficult to enter Japan. So I think hopefully within the next few months that will change. But if we look at tourism in Japan at the moment, and I deliberately choose this topic because for most of you, when you come to Japan as a student learning Japanese, you will also be a tourist. There's no question you will be a tourist. So learning that language and being a tourist are very, very much interconnected. So where is tourism in Japan at the moment? In 2019, Japan had the biggest rise in tourism ever. And as you probably know, the Olympics was going to be held in Japan in 2020 in Tokyo. And they were expecting 30 million tourists. But of course, coronavirus changed all of that. Instead of 30 million tourists, we got much less. However, the Olympics went ahead in 2021, and now we see tourists wanting to come back. And I predict within the next 12 months, once the borders are open, tourism will resume once again. But at the moment, tourism is mostly domestic in Japan, and many tourism operators are finding it very difficult, right? But for me, as a foreigner living in Japan now, it's a great time to be in Japan. I can go to all of these great places and not have tourists around me, right? So it's a really, really good time. And I think if you wanted to come and study in Japan, the sooner you do it, the better. So surveys have described Japan as the #1 tourist destination in the world. And it's no surprise that Japan is the #1 tourist destination in the world. It's safe. Things work effectively. People are friendly. Usually you can get help when you need it. And even in the middle of the busiest district in Tokyo at 3 a.m. on a Friday morning, you will never feel unsafe. Crime rates are very low. The standard of living is very high. Health services are very high. And when you put all of that together, it's no surprise that Japan is the #1 tourist destination in the world. Just some background here. If we look at the top 10 economies according to the world, top 10 tourism economies, according to the World Economic Forum survey, Japan is ahead of the United States, Spain, France, Germany, Switzerland, Australia, the United Kingdom, Singapore, and Italy. These are all countries that are famous for tourism as well. And to think that Japan is at the top of this list is really quite an achievement, right? And I will explain why this is the case. And this is probably these are probably the kinds of questions you have in your head about living in and visiting Japan. I'm sorry that this is very small. You may not be able to see the little writing, but why is Japan the #1 destination for tourism in the world? The first thing is Japan's business environment. In many ways, when you go to the shops in Japan, you can be assured that you will get good service, you will get the products that you want, and you will not get ripped off, right? There's a sense that this is what Japan is about. Safety and security, as I've already mentioned, Japan is probably the safest country I've ever traveled in, even for if you're a single female traveling on your own. It's very unlikely you will get harassed. It's very unlikely you will get your pocket picked and so on, which is quite different to many of the tourism destinations in the top 10. Health and hygiene. In many countries, wearing a mask during coronavirus times is seen as something that is taking away people's freedom, right? The country I'm from in Australia, we have a hard time trying to convince people to wear masks. But in a country like Japan, where there is a focus on the common good and everybody feels an obligation to each other, wearing a mask is not something that governments have to force people to do. People do it. Social distancing is not something that governments have to force people to do. People do it. So for your parents and family at home, when you say you're going to Japan, they can feel very assured that safety and security is probably the best in Japan of any country. Human resources and labor. If you wanted to find a job in Japan, obviously it depends on your Japanese language skills, but because Japan is an aging population, the numbers of people over 65 are constantly increasing. Where do they get young people to work in the jobs that are required in the services industry, in hospitals, in shops, in restaurants? It will come from people like you, probably. The other thing is information technology. Japan is obviously a country that is well known for information and technology, especially in the big cities. Wi-Fi can be a bit of a problem in the countryside sometimes, but other than that, the technology in Japan, as you expect, works. I've recently been traveling in Europe, and what I miss the most about Japan is the trains that run on time and everything that works, right? Also in terms of price competitiveness and the cost of living in Japan, compared to many other developed countries, and bear in mind that Japan is the third largest economy in the world behind the US and China. Compared to all of these developed country economies, the cost of living in Japan is relatively low compared to what we see from all of these other countries in terms of rental of accommodation outside of Tokyo and Osaka, in terms of the cost of living, food, and going out. So with all of that said, and I will work down the list as well, there's one last comment there. Two things, natural resources and cultural resources. Japan has some of the most amazing national parks, lakes, rivers, and mountains. So Japan is not all big city, right? There's also wonderful nature to have here. And we in Wakayama have some of the best nature in the whole of Japan. Cultural resources. And this is mainly what I will talk about. In front of me, you will see three things, this one, and this one. This is part of what are called kokeshi dolls, right? And they are traditional Japanese craft work. And I will talk more about this. But when we talk about Japanese craft and art and culture and what makes Japan unique, there are so many aspects that cannot be copied by other countries around the world. And this is one of them, and I will talk more about them later. So if I haven't convinced you already that Japan is a good place to live and work, then I will try a little bit harder. So let's see, what is cultural tourism? So when we talk about cultural tourism, what we are really talking about is what makes a country distinct from another one. And this is the formal part of the lecture where I will try and be more academic and less informal. So when we talk about cultural tourism, it implies a type of tourism activity in which the visitor's motivation is to learn, discover, experience, and consume the tangible and intangible cultural attractions in a tourism destination. What do we mean by tangible and intangible? This is tangible, something I can touch and something I can hold, right? Intangible are other things like music, festivals, lifestyle, which I will talk about a little bit more. If I go back to the slide, cultural attractions and products relate to a set of distinctive material, intellectual, spiritual, and emotional features of a society that encompasses arts, architecture, historical and cultural heritage, culinary heritage, that's food, literature, music, creative industries, and the living cultures with their lifestyles, value systems, beliefs, and traditions. And when you read that passage, what becomes clear, and for you, and I pose the question to all of you, you don't have to answer it, it's just a question for you. What has inspired you to be interested in Japanese culture? For many, I bet it's the films. For many, it's probably manga or J-pop or Japanese fashion or Japanese food or Japanese religion and spirituality, Shintoism and Buddhism. So there are many, many reasons that bring you here in the first place. And a lot of them are around cultural tourism, which is why we are talking about cultural tourism. So I will share these slides with you all. And there's a link at the bottom that if you want more information, you can click on to find more information later. So Further on cultural tourism, and the United Nations World Tourism Organization says this: the convergence or meeting between tourism and culture and the increasing interest of visitors in cultural experiences bring unique opportunities, but also complex challenges for the tourism sector. And the challenges are real, right? For you, for example, in the first few weeks in Japan, you will probably not be familiar with Japanese culture or the way things are meant to work or how you should behave or what you can say. And because your language competency might not be so good. So how do we overcome the challenges that you will face in the first instance? As the UNWTO says on the slide, tourism policies and activities should be conducted with respect for the artistic, archaeological, and cultural heritage, which they should protect and pass on to future generations. Particular care should be devoted to preserving monuments, worship sites, archaeological and historical sites, as well as museums, which must be widely open and accessible to tourism visits. And this is what occupies me in my work. How can we continue to protect Japanese culture from modernization and from westernization in particular? For many of you, when you come here, you don't want to see a Western version of Japan, right? You want to see the authentic Japan. And the countries that you're all from, Uzbekistan, Serbia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Brazil, China, Korea, Thailand, you all have strong cultures as well. And the reasons why people want to come to your countries. So if we turn this around, ask yourself, what are the cultural aspects of Japanese culture that interest you the most, that brings you here in the first place? So very often when we talk about tourism, we talk about sustainable tourism, but we also need to talk about sustainable cultural tourism, right? Because one thing tourism has been accused of doing is sometimes undermining culture in many places. When tourists arrive in a destination, they change the way things are. They give culture a new value. I see this in the work I do in Indonesia as well, particularly in Bali, where Balinese culture is being westernized very rapidly. So for you as students of Japanese culture, that's not what you want to see, right? You want to see the original Japan. But is the original Japan still available? Is it still there? Where can we see it? Is the question. So how can we be cultural tourists, but behave in a sustainable way? How can you be language tourists coming to Japan and studying Japanese, but behaving in a manner that enables you to have productive relationships with Japanese people? So when it comes to tourism and culture, we must find a balance between the development of it and the protection of it. And usually we refer to cultural tourism as cultural heritage. This is an example of Japanese cultural heritage, something that belongs to a people. Cultural heritage is something that defines people, that makes them unique and makes them who they are. But of course, when tourism and culture meets, we see that there is obviously an economic impact. Tourism brings money and jobs to cities and regions, and all the countries you are from, Brazil, Serbia, China, Indonesia, you all are also trying to develop a tourism industry, right? Because of the economic impacts. But as well as the economic impacts, it can also bring damage to residents' day-to-day lives, as well as the areas of culture and heritage. We see Bali, for example, with too many tourists. We see some areas in the Balkans, in Serbia and Croatia and Montenegro, too many tourists right in the middle of summer. Perhaps students who are in Serbia now can see that if you look out your window, if you live in the city, to see tourists everywhere, right? It can have an impact on the lifestyles that local people live. So given the possible negative effects of things like over-tourism or too much tourism and the impact on cultural heritage, some local communities and some cultural heritage experts say that tourism is a bad thing. Perhaps it just needs to be managed better. Sustainable cultural tourism offers a new perspective because it gives cultural heritage and local communities decision-making power. Well, in an ideal world, it should, but in practice, we see that sometimes local communities are not making the decisions for themselves when it comes to tourism and culture. Involving local communities and stakeholders in the decision-making process is key to ensuring results benefit both cultural heritage and the local population. And the last point there, the objective of sustainable cultural tourism is to ensure good conservation practices along with authentic interpretation that supports the local economy. So you can see that from your point of view, as someone interested in Japanology or Japanese culture and Japanese language, it is inevitable that you will be a tourist in Japan when you are here. So my point is, how can you be a tourist and enjoy authentic Japan, but at the same time, be sustainable in your behaviors, but at the same time, ensure that you are supporting local communities and supporting the protection of culture rather than the opposite. Okay. Again, according to the UNWTO, there are a lot of synergies or benefits to the link between tourism and culture. And it's no surprise that people like you who are interested in language are also interested in culture. You can't separate language and culture. Language and culture are interconnected in so many ways, right? And I've got no doubt that your love of the Japanese language is probably because of your admiration of Japanese culture and the things that you like about Japanese culture. So one question I would like to pose to all of you, and you can put an answer in the chat now. List one or two things that you admire the most about Japanese culture. And we probably won't respond to that directly unless we have time, but it will give us a good indication of what are the motivations for you wanting to be here in Wakayama at some point in the future. So if I can ask you while you're listening to me, what are the one or two things that you admire the most about Japanese culture that motivates you to learn Japanese and to want to visit Japan? Okay, this is not a test. You won't be marked. You will not get a certificate. It's a conversation between all of us. So go for it. And if one of you gives us the best answer, when you come to Wakayama, we'll give you a prize. I don't know what the prize is yet, but I will keep you in suspense. Okay, so culture is a fundamental part of the tourism experience, and its importance is growing. Today, cultural tourism is one of the largest and fastest developing global tourism markets. An estimated 4 out of 10 tourists choose their destination based on its cultural offering. They are increasingly attracted by intangible factors such as the atmosphere of a place, its association with famous people, ideas or events. In other words, by a place's culture, history and traditions. For example, I bet there isn't a single one of you watching this webinar that hasn't heard of Fuji-san, right? Mount Fuji. One of the most amazing things you will see here. I always know that when I'm flying from Osaka to Tokyo, and whenever I hear people excited and rushing to one side of the plane, I know that the pilot has announced that we are just flying over Fuji-san. Everybody loves Fuji-san, right? And you will too. I bet many of you here in this webinar have eaten Japanese cuisine, sushi, ramen, and so on, right? And this is what brings you here in the first place. That's a very important part of culture. I bet many of you have read manga. I bet many of you have watched Japanese films and Studio Ghibli. I bet many of you know who Totoro is, that he's not a human, that he's a non-human, right? So all of these things interconnect to make us interested in a place and its people and its culture. So, but when we talk about the benefits of closer links between culture and tourism, these go beyond the economic. When we travel to experience the culture of others, it means gaining a direct appreciation of cultural diversity, right? We know that the world, some parts of the world are still very full of conflict. How can we reduce conflict and build mutual understanding between people? Travel is one way to do that. Understanding the culture of someone else and of another country helps us understand who they are rather than rely on characterizations that are prejudiced or racist. So establishing new cultural ties and helping to keep our cultural heritage alive is really, really important. In order to ensure this, we need a sustainable approach. And sustainable means to ensure that what we do protects the resources for the next generation, right? Yes, we need to boost economic growth. We need jobs and we need businesses to survive in tourism. But we also need to preserve what makes a country and its people and its culture very special. We all know that in some cities, massive tourist inflows are taking their toll on heritage and on the quality of life of residents. And this is when tourism becomes unsustainable. So For that, and it just as a summary for this section, the links between culture and tourism are very, very strong. And when you think about this yourself, this is what drives you to come to this webinar. This is what drives you to come to learn Japanese, because you will come to the country and be prepared and ready to engage very closely with people and place. As a geographer, when I think of tourism, I think of three things: people, place, and environment. And all three things are very much linked to culture. So after that academic discussion of cultural tourism, what I want to do is talk about cultural tourism in Japan and what makes Japanese culture, what makes Japan as a destination to study, to visit, and to live in unique. There are many things, and because I've only got 1 hour or 90 minutes, there are only so many things I can say. So what I will do is I will draw on some of the main things that I think attracted my attention to Japan in the first place as a visitor, and then secondly as a resident. Okay, when we talk about Japanese culture, what do we actually mean about Japanese culture? Here, this is a summary. Japan is renowned worldwide as a nation steeped in a culture that combines both tradition and modernity. This is tradition, right? This is a traditional part of Japanese culture. J-pop is another example of modernity and modern Japanese culture, right? So when we think about culture, we really have two pillars, the traditional and the modern. It's the same very much in your own countries. In Korea, as an example, Korean gastronomy is an example of tradition. K-pop is an example of modernity in Korea. So thousands of years as an isolated island country allowed Japan to undergo various cultural evolutions in solitude. Unlike European countries where borders crossed and armies conquered other countries and people mixed, Japan remained largely independent and away from the rest of the world and unconquered when it comes to conflicts and war and those kinds of things. So this has created a truly unique traditional culture. And there are so many things about Japanese culture that are not evident elsewhere. And I will point some of them out later. Japanese tradition is influenced and altered to create the unique culture of modern Japan, evident in its combination of the traditional concepts with the latest technology and art. Okay, so here's one example of Japanese culture that perhaps some of you have heard about, and it's really important for hospitality and tourism. Omotenashi. Now, some of you might think, what is omotenashi? And perhaps you have heard of it. My understanding of omotenashi is that it is a deep-rooted culture which comes from the tea ceremony, meaning to wholeheartedly look after guests. And this is why Japan is is the top tourism destination. When you have a destination where people adopt and believe in omotenashi, it's very difficult for tourists to feel unwelcome, right? The term is a microcosm of the country, representing the Japanese mindset of hospitality, centering around care rather than expectation. And this is what builds hospitality and tourism in Japan. So omotenashi, if you want to know more about this, you could probably go to YouTube or into Google and find out more about omotenashi. This, for me, as a tourism researcher, is what describes Japan as a destination most of all. You won't get omotenashi in Australia, where I'm from. You won't get omotenashi in France or in Italy. You will get different types of hospitality, right? But this is what omotenashi is and how it defines Japanese hospitality and tourism. Food. I mean, you know, where do I start when it comes to talking about Japanese food? So for some of you, I hope you've had your lunch. If it's lunchtime and you haven't eaten yet, this will probably make you hungry, right? But when it comes to Japan, food is one of the things that stands out the most. Where did sushi come from? Japan. Perhaps Koreans might have a different understanding of that because Koreans have their own version of sushi, right? But as far as I understand, sushi is intrinsically Japanese. Sashimi. But again, our Korean friends will probably say we have sashimi in Korea as well. But it goes without saying that so many things when it comes to gastronomy and food in Japan are unique. Ramen is unique to Japan. Although if we look at the history of ramen, some of the Chinese students will say, but I read in a history book that ramen came from China. So what we can see is that while Japanese cuisine is unique in many ways, it has also adopted and integrated other kinds of cuisines. The country I'm from, Australia, We have a cuisine, an indigenous cuisine, but our cuisine is a mix of so many things. And this is a function of the globalized world. Everything crosses over. And in my travels recently in July in Italy and France and the Netherlands, I was amazed at the number of Japanese restaurants all over Europe, right? And it makes you think that if people are interested in a country's cuisine, it's possible that they will be interested in its language, and they will be interested in coming to the country to visit it and eat the food in its authentic place, right? Because as we know, there's a lot of Japanese cuisine that's not so authentic around the world. So in the chat box, once again, I ask everyone to nominate your favorite Japanese cuisine, your favorite Japanese food. It's a very difficult thing, right? Because where do you start? When you look at the long menu of Japanese gastronomy, there are so many things. And you might say to me, what is your favorite, Joseph? What is your favorite Japanese item to eat? It's a very difficult thing for me. But if I were to nominate one, I would say onigiri is my favorite. If you don't know what onigiri is like, usually it's something like in a triangle. You can buy it at a convenience store, and it's easy and cheap and quick to pick up and eat when you're hiking, when you're traveling, when you're sitting at your desk having lunch, or as a midnight snack. That's my favorite, but I look forward to seeing what your favorites are. So please put it up in the chat box. And when you come to Wakayama, Kumiko Jacobson, my colleague, I think she will be doing a cooking demonstration on Thursday, so you can't miss that. But it's very difficult attending a cooking demonstration virtually, right? Because you can't taste the food. But anyway, this is one of the things that you have to look forward to in Japan and Japanese culture, food. There is an endless array of things to eat. Unfortunately, some of my friends who come and visit me, they say, I don't eat seafood. And if you don't eat seafood, you're in trouble, because the best parts of Japanese cuisine is seafood. But don't worry, there's chicken, there's pork, and there are other things as well. So there's even Japanese pizza. There's no Italians here, but imagine Japanese pizza. What do you think Japanese pizza is like? I will let you experience it for yourself when you come here. Okay, the next thing I want to draw attention to is this. Now you're probably looking at this. These are all landscape photographs of different towns and different ways of living. Now you will see the one on the bottom where my mouse is now, and you will look at all of these different landscapes. And up here in Wakayama and Takayama and other places, one of the most attractive things about traveling Japan is its traditional architecture, its traditional houses, and its traditional village setup. Here in Shirakawa-go is my favorite, and I will have a photograph that I took of it recently. These houses have withstood the changes over a long period of time. Of course, now most of them are like museums, because not all Japanese people live in houses like this. In fact, most Japanese people live in modern apartment buildings and modern houses, right? But these old houses are becoming less and less common. We see many foreigners coming to Japan, buying these houses, renovating them, and living in them. They describe the romance of a time long ago. And here in Kurashiki, in Okayama, it's amazing when you see, it's like a living laboratory of how a traditional Japanese town used to be, mixed in with modern elements. So one of the things that I find most interesting about Japan is going to different parts of Japan and looking at different architecture, different housing styles, different village setups, and trying to get an understanding of what Japan might have been like. And sadly, in many Japanese cities, many of these traditional houses no longer appear because of the damage they withstood during the war, right? But when you go outside of the cities, to places like Kyoto in particular, and Takayama, Okayama, and Hokkaido, and in the north in Sendai, you will see many of these places. And this is what is most interesting. Walking into a Japanese traditional house with tatami mats, screens, and other things. Quite amazing. You will love it. World Heritage Sites. You can see I'm talking too much and I'm probably going over time, but World Heritage Sites are most important. Fujisan is probably one of the most important ones, a natural World Heritage Site, protected because of its qualities. Kyoto, the historic city, has 15 cultural and 4 natural UNESCO World Heritage, that's around Japan, but Kyoto has many World Heritage Sites, temples, shrines, museums. And when we think about the culture of a place, World Heritage and protection and World Heritage certification is particularly important. There are many in China, in Brazil, in Vietnam, Hoi An in particular, in Indonesia and Serbia as well. So World Heritage is no secret to you. Festivals. Now is the time for festivals in Japan, or Matsuri, right? There are many festivals across different parts of Japan that are unique to the people and place where the festivals are conducted. Unfortunately, in 2020, 21, 22, because of coronavirus, festivals haven't been able to take place. But as we come to terms with coronavirus, festivals are starting to begin again. And if there's one thing that will stick in your memory about Japan, is it's attending the different matsuri around the country, where you can learn about Japanese culture in action. And it often combines artistic performances, rituals, traditions, food, music, art, dancing. This one involving mainly men trying to push something onto the shore, or men running up mountains with flames and other things like that. There are so many matsuri that you could spend a whole lifetime in Japan and not attend all of them. So these festivals, as I say there, encourage public participation from both locals and visitors from overseas. These kinds of events forge a deeper connection to Japanese culture by you, the visitor, taking part in a matsuri. Even though you don't speak Japanese, like I don't, I found myself being heavily involved in these kinds of things. Now, as my colleagues here behind the camera know, this is one of my favorite things about Japan, onsen. Now, if you don't know what an onsen is, it should be one of the first things you look out for when you come to Japan. So an onsen is part of Japan's traditional culture in terms of how people, well, firstly, an onsen is a hot spring in other ways of describing it. And it's because Japan as a country sits on this volcanic hot zone where there's a whole lot of volcanic activity happening, and there is volcanic, naturally occurring hot springs around the country. Now, here is a sample of all the different onsens around, not all, but some of my favorite onsens around the country. My favorite here in Wakayama is in Shirahama Prefecture, where if you can imagine this, it's the middle of winter, you're sitting in a hot spring right next to the Pacific Ocean, and as the waves crash into the side of the onsen, the waves come over the top. So cold seawater while you are sitting in a hot spring. Amazing, you will love it. There is one downside to onsens that many foreigners have to get used to. You have to be naked in the onsen. It's part of Japanese culture. My Australian friends in particular were not very comfortable with that. But within the first 10 minutes of you being in an onsen, you forget about what everyone looks like. And if we look at onsen here, one of the main reasons that I think onsen is a very distinct mark of traditional Japanese culture is that you don't find this culture in any part of the world. You might have hot spring culture in Iceland or in China or in other parts where there's volcanic activity. But onsen culture links several things. Accommodation, usually you will stay in a ryokan or a traditional Japanese inn. Japanese food, Japanese traditional wear like a yukata, and you wear Japanese traditional shoes, a geta, where you walk around the onsen, imagining that you were back in the Japan of 200 years ago. I mean, look at that picture there on my screen of Ginzan Onsen. Imagine sitting in a hot spring with snow falling outside of you. Amazing experiences that you won't have anywhere else. And there are many onsen all around Japan. Wakayama has some of the best, as I said. So if you come to Wakayama, you will be very well looked after when it comes to onsen. Okay, if you're not excited by now, you really should be. Okay, so let's look at another aspect of Japanese culture, right? Japanese sports. Now, some of you, when we think about Japanese sports, you're probably thinking baseball. What else is uniquely Japanese? Of course, baseball isn't uniquely Japanese. It was adopted from outside. But this is uniquely Japanese, sumo wrestling, right? Where else in the world do you get this? Where else in the world does this image, what other country in the world does this image make you think of when you think of where this comes from? You know, men wearing these, what look like big nappies for men with their hair in a ponytail, in a pigtail, very strong, fighting each other in a circular ring, right? Amazing. One of the most amazing aspects of Japanese culture. But as you can see, and you can probably hear my enthusiasm, there are an unlimited number of things that will make you go, wow, this is amazing. This is Japanese culture. In this case, Japanese culture is intertwined with sport, whether it be kendo and kyudo, originally developed for hunting and combat. Judo, everyone knows judo, right? It's in the Olympics, a combat sport with a philosophical aim of perfecting one's character. Or sumo, the ancient Shinto ritual that has represented Japan as a national sport for centuries. Its internationalization, this is the internationalization and popularization of sumo, is such that we have seen champions of sumo from other countries, from Hawaii, from Mongolia, where else? Not so much from China, but certainly from Central Asia. There, maybe from Uzbekistan, there might be some sumo wrestlers. Okay. Miko-san said, I have 20 minutes, so I better move on. Okay, so you can see by the way, I'm not paid by the Japan National Tourist Office. I am just naturally enthusiastic when I'm talking about Japanese culture. So my Japanese cultural experience, in the next 20 minutes, I will talk about that. And I will show you some photographs that I've taken and things that are linked to Japanese culture that have attracted my eye. Obviously, Fujisan. This was taken from the Shinkansen on the way between Tokyo and Osaka. And the Mount Fujisan is like a magnet for your eye. There is so much. While looking at it from a distance gives you this awesome feeling, imagine if you were able to walk up Fujisan or even experience the culture at the foot of Fujisan. Here, I combine two things, actually three things that make me interested in Japanese culture. Here, you will see the wooden doll. That's a part of traditional culture that I showed you. These ones, kokeshi. Made by traditional craftsmen. Here you will see a vase. This one is a very old vase. I think it's from Mie Prefecture, and it talks about Japanese ceramics, which is a very unique aspect of Japanese culture and why people come here. And here you will see the cherry blossom. You will know that when you come here in spring, Japanese people go crazy for the cherry blossom, right? And when you are here, you will understand why. But also associated with the vase and the cherry blossom is ikebana, the art of flower arrangement, which is usually something that women do, but somehow I've become very interested in it. And I find it really, really interesting in terms of how it helps you express your artistic side. Okay, enough of that. Spiritual and religious tourism here. In Japan, there are endless numbers of shrines and temples that you can go to. This one is in Kyoto, one of the most famous ones, Fushimi Inari. You climb up the mountain and there are all of these red torii gates all over the place. Amazing experience. You will never have this anywhere else. Onsen culture once again. This one is in Wakayama Prefecture. You'll be very close to it when you are at Wakayama. This one is in Kawayu Onsen. I was sitting in that hot spring. Next to the hot spring was the river, and next to the river was the forest. And at night when you're sitting in it, you can hear all the forest animals, right? Imagine that experience. You cannot have this anywhere else. Japan also has a beach culture, part of its modern beach culture, right? It's very different to beach culture in other countries, but this is in Wakayama Prefecture as well, in Shirahama, which is about maybe 90 minutes or 2 hours away from Wakayama, depending who's driving. And when you look at this, you think, well, this is Japanese beach culture like anywhere else. But there are some distinctive elements of Japanese beach culture that I will let you discover for yourself. Incidentally, the sand on this beach comes from Australia. The history is that there was a major typhoon once that blew away all the sand. And because Shirahama means white sand, you couldn't have brown sand on the beach called Shirahama, right? So the local government imported the sand from Australia, and it's white sand again. And behind the camera is Nagano-san, and he is from around near Shirahama. He can tell you more about Shirahama. Okay, now you are probably wondering what this is. This is what I find most attractive about onsen. Onsen culture is about the community. It's about people exchanging gossip and conversation. It's about people meeting each other. It's the center of small towns in rural areas. You will see in this picture, men, women, and foreign tourists are all together in the same onsen, naked. Some of you might be horrified by that, right? But this is part of the culture that makes it really endearing and attractive to you. This is in Aomori Prefecture in the north. This is one of the most amazing onsens you will find in Shirahama, in not in Shirahama, in Wakayama Prefecture. The name of the town escapes me right now. Unomine. Thank you, Kumiko-san. And this is an onsen for 2 people. If you come with your boyfriend or girlfriend, very romantic. You will love it. You must go there. Okay. This is modern Japanese culture. This is the art museum in Osaka, right? Many of you will know the character on the left, but this character on my left, which is your right, this character, the cat, once again showcases how distinctive Japanese modern art can be, and why many people want to visit Japan, not just for the traditional culture, but the modern culture as well. Here in Wakayama Prefecture in Hongu, you know, these famous shrines and temples are all over the place, and those large torii gates. Here, this is the biggest one in Hongu, probably one of the biggest ones I know. It looks small in this photograph, but if you can look at the size of the humans standing there, you can see it's probably, you know, if you put maybe 20 people on top of each other, that's the height of the torii gates, right? Once again, nature. And these wind, what in English we refer to them as wind socks or koi. Koi is the fish, right? When you see these in shops overseas, you will say that is Japanese culture that people are adopting, right? The mix between material culture, which is the fish that you see there, and nature is something that is quite distinctive in Japan. Here in Tokushima, one of the oldest suspension bridge made of vines, right? And you see this around the place. Now, you would think to yourself, how long has this been here? And can I still walk on it? Yes, you can. And it's been here for hundreds of years and it's been preserved. Now, walking over it requires a lot of courage. And if you're scared of heights, it can be quite scary. But what you see here is an example of how much traditional culture from years gone by is still preserved in rural Japan. And in my work, I'm interested in understanding how we can preserve this kind of culture and not seeing it get lost as modernity takes hold. Okay, this once again is the landscapes that I talked about. This is in Wakayama Prefecture. Okay, how we've preserved the preservation of old buildings and old houses manages to create and preserve the distinctive Japanese culture. Food, of course. If you haven't had your lunch, I'm sorry for that, but look at this. This is typical of this kind of Japanese cuisine where you get, in the West, you might get a piece of meat, some vegetables, and some potatoes. But in Japanese cuisine, you often get little bits of everything. Here we have some seafood, some pickles, some fish, some vegetables, some soup, and so on. All right. And there's no question that Japanese gastronomy is probably one of the most popular aspects of Japanese culture that people abroad look at and like. These are the traditional houses in Shirakawa-go I talked about. Absolutely amazing. You can see they are 3 stories high. In the picture, they don't look that big, but in real life, they are quite huge, right? And what is interesting about these houses is that in traditional times, long ago, in order to build these roofs, the community would be involved in building the roof. They will build the roof on one house, then go to their next house and build that roof on another house, and then on another house. And this talks about how community and community culture and people looking after each other is a strong aspect still of Japanese culture today. But it has its roots in traditional culture from a long time ago, where people work together to achieve a common goal. There are many modern museums in Japan. This is in Aomori, and this dog here is quite large. If I was standing next to it, you would probably need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of me. This is Ken, the dog in Aomori, and very famous for people who like contemporary arts. And when you look around Japan, there are many contemporary art museums. So while there is the traditional culture that will get your attention, the contemporary art museum scene here is amazing. Like, look at this. This is in the museum from Aomori. Futuristic ideas about what Fujisan looks like, or futuristic descriptions of Japanese culture and key people and events in Japanese history that define Japanese culture. Here, one of my favorites. Now, I've said one of my favorites several times because I've got many favorites. I don't just have one. Now, imagine this, right? As a tourist to Japan, wearing a yukata like this this couple here going to a temple or shrine to pay your respects to your ancestors, or simply to observe the way Japanese people interact with temples and shrines. It's an amazing aspect of Japanese culture that you won't get anywhere else. Here, this one is in, no, that's not Fushimi Inari. I think this one is in Kamakura near Tokyo. This is where I took the photograph. Yes, Kamakura. This one, how romantic is that? If you tell your boyfriend or girlfriend you're coming to Japan, they will insist that they must come with you because of pictures like this. This is in Kyoto, the famous walk up to Kiyomizu-dera, one of the most visited parts of Kyoto. Shops, umbrellas, lights. This is in the middle of winter, right? So the weather's not as warm as it is now. But what you can see here, and I'm sure from this photograph, you can feel the atmosphere, the way Japanese culture creates a unique experience and atmosphere. This, I'm sure everyone knows who this is. I'm not going to tell you who this is because I'm sure you know. If you don't know, you will have to search. Okay, this figure is very important in Japanese popular culture for children, for adults, and for most people who come to Japan. They seek out these kinds of things as souvenirs for their family at home. This is Totoro, by the way, very famous character in Studio Ghibli. Now, for me as a person growing up overseas, before I knew anything about Japan, I knew about Totoro, and for many of you probably do as well. And this is an aspect of Japanese culture that brings people to Japan. There's a Studio Ghibli museum in Tokyo that you must go to when you come here, and you will feel like you are on the set of a Studio Ghibli film like Spirited Away or something like that. Okay, I'm nearly finished, Kumiko-san. This is in Kyoto once again, Kinkakuji, a very famous old cultural heritage attraction. The building is painted in gold leaf on a lake with a forest behind it. And these kinds of scenes are typical of what you would expect Japan to look like. And believe me, it is exactly like this. So when we think about Japanese culture, these kinds of experiences are important. And for Chinese and Korean members watching this, you will probably see similar East Asian type flavors in your country as well. The changes of seasons. This is the autumn leaves. I've already talked about cherry blossoms, right? In Japan, part of the experience of Japanese culture is most on display when there is a change of seasons. As I said, Japanese people go crazy for cherry blossoms, and foreigners too when they come here, they understand. But then in autumn, when the leaves go red, imagine a forest full of red leaves like this, right? This is partly the natural heritage and culture of Japan that makes it quite unique. Local communities. This is nowhere that you will know of. This is a local community in Wakayama Prefecture performing a traditional dance where the whole community comes together to do this. It looks like a dragon dance for Chinese students, and it's quite similar. I can't quite remember where this photograph was taken, but it was in Wakayama Prefecture. And you can see how small communities in rural villages practice Japanese culture more than in the big cities. So if you wanted to experience Japanese culture and authentic Japanese culture, it's more likely you will get it in the rural areas rather than in the cities. But of course, this is also part of Japanese culture, right? The big cities, the bright lights, the city culture, the restaurants, the izakayas, the bars, karaoke. You know, that's another thing that I didn't mention, a part of Japanese culture. Karaoke is amazing. For me, I never liked it before I came to Japan, but now I'm hooked. It's part of what I like to do with my colleagues. But because of coronavirus, we haven't been able to do it so much. But hopefully when you come here, you must try karaoke. Okay. Most of you know who the character there is, right? I don't think she needs any introduction. I refer to her as she, even though it's not a human. That's Hello Kitty, right? Everyone knows that. And here in Tokyo, you can go to the Sanrio Puroland, which is like a theme park where you can see all of these characters, including Hello Kitty together. You know, what is called contents tourism. You will see people dressed in Hello Kitty. You will see people performing Hello Kitty, but also appreciating and engaging with Hello Kitty, right? This is probably what interests you in Japanese culture. And this is why I highlighted this. This is just one example. And of course, this is my favorite. Yes, I have one favorite. This is my favorite. a Japanese traditional culture, wooden dolls, but this is only one aspect of Japanese traditional culture. There are many, many others. Ceramics is another one. This is me and a bowl that I was making at a ceramics place some time ago, right? Now, some of you will want to have this experience as well, and lots of tourists want to have this experience. We know that around the world, Japanese ceramics are appreciated and valued. Why not come here and make your own? Once again, another part of Japanese culture. And here, which is what you will have to see when you come here, this is in the very late afternoon at Wakayama Castle with the spring blossoms on display. So this is something that I think you will see in the first instance when you come here. Okay, I put this photograph up, so it's evidence of me experiencing Japanese culture. You probably don't recognize me because I'm in the distance. This is me sitting there, admiring these two Japanese ladies in their kimono, or maybe they were admiring me, I'm not sure. But as you can see, to experience Japanese culture, you don't have to be moving. You can be sitting and observing. And this is what I find most fascinating about traveling around Japan. And once again, we go back to the cities. This is what I took the other night when I was in Osaka. In, where is this? This man is quite famous. Shinsaibashi? Yes. Shinsaibashi in the middle of Tokyo, Osaka. Usually it's busier than this. Because of coronavirus, it's very quiet, right? But here, this gives you a feel for the big city. I've talked about the rural areas, but now let's go to the big city and the city lights. Of course, this is Osaka. You can multiply this 4 or 5 times when you look at Tokyo as an example. But I'm biased because I'm in the south and not in the north or center. Okay, in conclusion, I want to ask you the question. Things you didn't know about Japanese culture before you came to this webinar. And I bet by the time this webinar ends, you'll be ringing your travel agent and asking them to book your ticket because you want to come to Japan straight away, right? So if you want to do that, then I would be very happy with the impact that this seminar has made on you. In conclusion, I want to put this here. This is a video. You can see some smoke rising. This is a traditional, I suppose, Japanese house and how they would heat their water and heat the house as well. So with that said, I'm sorry that I rambled on too much, and I'm sorry that I took you in lots of different directions when I'm talking about tourism and culture in Japan, but that's because there is so much to talk about. And what I have talked about is only the tip of the iceberg. There is so much more for you to experience. So thank you to Kumiko-san, who's behind the camera, and Shinichi-san, and to Husna Sensei, who was here earlier, and to all of you for showing up, and to all of you for answering questions in the chat. I don't know if we have time for questions or we need to finish or what, but Kumiko-san said, yes, we have time for questions. So if anybody have questions, you can ask me the question directly, or you can send me a message if you want me to ask the question. This one? Yeah, this one. Okay. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? I see.
I have a question.
Yes, yes. And please introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hello, konnichiwa. My name is Petar. I'm from Serbia. By the way, first of all, if the Japanese Tourism Board isn't paying you, they should ring them up, get the check.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, really nice job here. But my question to you is, since you come from Australia, which of course is very westernized, very Anglo-Saxon,
yes.
What was your biggest instance of culture shock when you first came to Japan?
Oh, where do I start? It's a very good question. It's Peter, right? Peter?
Yeah, Petar, but it's okay. You can call me Peter.
Peter, no, thank you for your question and nice to meet you. Well, I've been here 4 years and I still have them. So it's not something that happens at the beginning because it takes a while to become accustomed to the way of life in a different country. As you can see, I look Asian, right? Because I'm half Chinese. And most often people my culture shocks are often because of my fault, because people assume that I'm Japanese and that I speak Japanese very, very well. But for many foreigners, culture shock can be things like, let me think of one that everybody will identify with. For example, bowing as an example. I would do this to you if we met each other, and often in formal and informal situations, it will vary. The biggest culture shock for me is, how the body language that I need to exercise needs to fit the situation. For example, now, I'm not sure, do I shake hands? Do I do fists? Do I do an elbow? Do I, when I was recently in France, I got off the plane and my friends met me. In Japan, we would bow, we wouldn't necessarily shake hands, but they came up to me, gave me a big hug and 2 kisses, and not wearing a mask, right? So that was an example of culture shock. How do I adjust back to what I know and then come back to Japan and adjust again? So how do we fit into the body language that is unique to Japan and not seem awkward and uncomfortable and make mistakes, right? That's one of the biggest culture shocks. I guess culture shocks are not necessarily always negative. They can be quite positive as well. Certainly, my biggest culture shock, one of them anyway, was going into an onsen for the first time, and I was supposed to be totally naked in front of all of these people that I didn't know, right? There can't be a bigger culture shock than that. Or going into an izakaya and seeing people eat ramen, right? In many cultures, when you eat, you're supposed to eat quietly. But if you eat ramen, you can't help yourself but be noisy, and I still haven't perfected the art of eating ramen where you have to slurp the noodles without making a mess on yourself. And I'm constantly making a mess on myself. That's my fault. But once again, it's these kinds of things that are not necessarily negative. And for travelers and for people interested in other cultures, being able to make mistakes, being able to not take yourself so seriously when you're in another country helps you understand cultures better. If you take yourself so seriously or are easily offended, it can be a problem. So Peter, that's just 2 examples. There are many more we could share, but I'm sure when you come to Japan, you will experience many of your own.
Yeah, of course. When I do have the opportunity, that's probably a long ways off, but when I do, I'll probably be culture shocking myself all day. Wonderful presentation. Thank you very, very much. That's it for me.
Thank you. Well, we look forward to seeing you here. Any other questions? Don't be shy. Okay. If we had a prize, Peter, we should give it to you. I'm not sure if we have a prize, but when you come, we can discuss a prize. Okay, anyone else?
That sounds neat.
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, that sounds neat. when I do come, I'll ring you up.
Yeah, please do. You will find me. I can't escape. Okay, any other questions? I see many of you with so many comments. Thank you all for your comments. I really appreciate your positive remarks. Hello Kitty and Gudetama. Indeed, everybody should know Gudetama. If you don't know Gudetama, Google it. I have a Gudetama thing somewhere, but I don't. It's in my office. Okay. Okay, everyone is saying Harajuku fashion, of course. I mean, if you go to Yoyogi Park in Tokyo, you will see unique performative culture where people dress up in Lolita culture. Okay. What else? Someone said a work of art. I'm not sure what you're referring to, but I presume it's not me. Yes, and as Peter said, I should get a payment. Thank you, Peter. I will pass on your message and we can share 50-50 when you get here. Onigiri and takoyaki, octopus balls, you will find here in Osaka. Whenever you travel to different parts of Japan, there is a specialty. And takoyaki is a specialty, shabu shabu. I can see people like food. It's no surprise that food is the entryway to the culture of another country. Sushi and takoyaki. Would love to try Kobe beef. If you have lots of money, it'll be really nice. Ramen, of course, sushi, okonomiyaki, any Japanese noodle. See, it's food. You can see that food is dominating people's thoughts about Japan. Chicken katsu and matcha. Oh yes, very nice. No one said tea ceremony. If you want to experience something totally unique, experience the Japanese tea ceremony. Warabi mochi, someone said, very specific. Ramen. The Japanese view of impermanence, Japanese life and Japanese culture. Thank you, Wendy. That is a really interesting conversation to be had. I'm very much interested in the idea of wabi-sabi as an example, right? If you don't know what wabi-sabi is, Google wabi-sabi. It's amazing. You will find it really, really interesting. There is a risk that in coming to Japan, you want to stay here for longer, and you might want to stay here forever. So I'll give you that warning in advance. The interaction in the Japanese society in anime and manga, absolutely, you are correct. Cleanliness, calmness, traditional and minimalist modern architecture, the passionate research atmosphere. You are right. But as a researcher, I can tell you, every time we romanticize a country, we will always find an exception to it, right? But having said that, you are right about all of those things. That was from Finlandia at, I think, Gajah Mada University in Indonesia. Japanese tourism and culture, very interesting. Yes, you are right, Julia. Japanese syncretism of culture. Seems like the Indonesian students are very interested in this aspect of Japanese culture. And Kenix from Binus says, Japan's culture is unique and often shows a lot in other media. For example, I noticed that among Japan's festival, they showed in media, or how beautiful the places are. Totally. I totally agree with you, Kenix. Anime and the cultural impact it has, totally has. Did you all know that in the Oscars, a Japanese film received the best foreign language film this year, a movie called Drive My Car. It goes for nearly 3 hours, and it's filmed mostly in Hiroshima Prefecture, which is very close to us. If you haven't seen that Japanese film, watch it. One of the best ways to learn about Japanese culture and Japanese language is to watch Japanese film. Origami, someone says origami. Origami is amazing. I'm hopeless at origami, but you are very correct. Origami is distinct. All of these things are distinct to Japan, right? You wouldn't describe origami belonging to any other country apart from Japan. The Japanese people and their culture, the aesthetics and cuisine of the culture. That's what Peter said. What else? Passionate about the things they produce. Yes, in many, some of you might have heard of the, what is it called now? In the north, I can't think of it, but the way humans and nature are meant to coexist, not compete with each other, not that humans are greater than nature, but coexist in partnership. Perhaps it's part of Shintoism, I suppose. Yes, calligraphy, kimono, ikebana, festivals. It's one of my favorite everyday things is to go home after work and wear my yukata. So I look like an ancient shogun from a long time ago. With that said, I'm not sure how much more time we have, but festivals are cool. You're right, spirituality. Would anybody like to ask me a question before we finish up? Anybody?
I would like to ask a question, Professor, about the Kokeshido, if I may.
Oh, someone has their microphone on. Were you asking me a question? If you do, you have to speak up, please.
Yes, I would like to ask a question about the Kokeshido, Professor. Should I just ask it now, or?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you so well. Can you turn your volume?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry. As I said before, maybe I would like to ask about the Kokeshido, Professor. Maybe this is also your expertise in research, and since my knowledge of the Kokeshido is still limited, are the facial expression on the Kokeshido are one of the important aspects that we need to pay attention to? Because if I'm not mistaken, there are usually something that have a representation or meaning for traditional arts and craft.
Yes, totally. That's a very good question. What's your name?
Tiffany, Professor.
Tiffany, thank you for your question. You sound like you are in Indonesia.
Yes, I'm from Indonesia, Binus.
Yeah. So thank you for the question. You are totally right. For example, if we look at these three that I have here, right? You are right. The distinctive patterns, the head shape, the shape of the doll. These are all unique to the artists of a particular place. Different parts of Japan create different kokeshis. And these traditional craftsmen, in many ways, there's a traditional way of copyright. No one would copy this one because it belongs to the artist, the style, the colors, and the facial expressions. You are right. Here we have the hair, the eyes. Sometimes they have a smile, right? For example, this one, if my memory serves me correctly, this is distinctive of the type of kokeshi made in Sendai or in that area because of the head and the shape of the head. This one, on the other hand, you might be able to see, you will see has very distinctive facial features. And all of my kokeshi, I give names to, all of my colleagues in the office. This one is one of my colleagues in the office, and you can see that the shapes are all different, right? The colors are different. And underneath the kokeshi, and let me hold this up for you, you will see that it is signed by the artist. And one of the issues with cultural heritage like this is that the people making these are getting older or are dying. How do we revive the techniques for these kinds of things, right? It's very, very difficult. And many countries face this. How do they continue the making of traditional art like this if the traditional artists are not passing their skills on to the young people, or the young people are not interested in learning? I remember when I went to Naruko, where this one is possibly from, the old artist there, he must have been in his 70s. He has said he's been looking for an apprentice for the last 10 years, but he couldn't find anyone to pass on his skills to, right? And you are right. These are becoming, and I shouldn't tell you this because I would probably like them for myself, but these are becoming quite valuable. Ones that have unique designs and made by particular artists who are renowned for their excellence are becoming very, very valuable. A lot of people in Europe, in China, in Australia collect these because each one has its own distinctive character, its own facial features, unique to the artist. And usually you will know where it comes from. It doesn't come from a factory. It comes from a place where the artist is from, and you will see the name of the artist under there. So your question is a very important one about culture more broadly, not just in Japan, but everywhere. And this question I'm trying to answer in my research is, how do we protect traditional culture from too much tourism, but also how do we protect traditional culture from disappearing altogether? So thank you for your question, Tiffany. I'm not sure if I've got enough time here for another question. Yes, we have time for another question if anybody wants to ask one. Thank you, Tiffany. I appreciate the question.
Thank you so much for the answer, Professor.
Go ahead.
Okay, good day, Your Excellency, Professor. I also want to give the question. However, firstly, I want to introduce myself. My name is Bahadur. My surname is Shamiljanov. I'm from Uzbekistan. I study at the University of World Economics and Diplomacy. My direction is international relations and also political science. And my question is, can you tell us about the student exchange program, please? Also, if possible, send more information to us by email because we can forget about it. And thank you so much.
Thank you for your question. I'm sorry I missed your name.
Bahadur. My name is Bahadur.
Bahadur, nice to meet you. Thanks for your question. You wanted to know about the student exchange program. I have to be honest and say, I don't know much about the student exchange program, but we can ensure that we follow up in the next sessions to come that will give you more information about the student exchange program. I know because of coronavirus, the student exchange program has been very difficult to deliver, but as coronavirus restrictions start lifting, we'll be able to welcome students back here to Japan. I understand the student exchange program is a very good one. Students come here on a number of different arrangements. Sometimes they come on a scholarship from the Japanese government, right? Sometimes they might come as a direct exchange between their university and Wakayama University. Generally, they're the two ways in which students come here. So, but to get the specific information, we'll try to make sure that either today or tomorrow or the next day, we'll get someone to provide that information. But I'm glad you're thinking of coming here. I don't think you will have any regrets when you come here, because if you're studying now and your idea is to learn about international relations or cultural exchange, Japan really is the best place to do that because it's a unique culture in many aspects, and it's a safe and comfortable environment in which to do it in. So thank you, Fajardo, for your question. We'll hopefully get more information to you soon.
Thanks a lot.
Anybody else? Or if you would prefer to put your question in the chat box, I can do that as well. Oh, someone who's Nanda,
excuse me,
you have
sir.
a question.
Yes. So for the first, thank you for your presentation about Japanese culture tourism, Sensei. Actually, I want to ask something about Japanese cuisine tourism.
Sorry, can you
Especially
repeat that, Nanda?
Excuse me?
Can you repeat what you just said?
Okay. Actually, I want to ask something about Japanese cuisine tourism.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. So especially about halal tourism development in Japan. Halal tourism.
Oh yes.
So actually, it's very convenient to Muslim tourists in Japan right now. So I'd like to know how about your opinion about halal tourism development in Japan? So
that's a very good question, Nanda, because as we know, you may have seen my colleague Husna Sensei, who was here earlier. She and I have been talking about this issue of halal tourism in Japan, right? And the challenges that Muslim travelers face in Japan. If you don't speak Japanese, you don't read Japanese, going to a restaurant can be really, really difficult, because how do you ask whether a particular dish has pork or items that are not halal, right? It's very challenging. And it's an opportunity for tourism research and for tourism policy making. And this is what Husna Sensei is trying to develop knowledge of. How can we make travel more friendly for Muslim travelers? How can we introduce halal tourism? How can we introduce halal to travelers in Japan, but not only travelers, but also to the Japanese community? For example, in some places you will find halal, but you have to look hard enough in your food app. For example, Husna Sensei took me to a place in Osaka, appropriately called Ali's, and at Ali's you can find any kind of meat, and it's all halal. Last weekend I went to a restaurant in Shinsaibashi. It was a Hare Krishna restaurant, which is mainly vegan and vegetarian. So everything is halal, right? More or less. In some parts of Tokyo, you can find Turkish. There's a lot of Turkish restaurants where you can find halal food. So I think it's an important part of tourism development in the future. And if you want to know more about halal tourism, come to Wakayama, and Husna Sensei and I will work with you on this. I think it's really, really important. So thanks for your question. I can understand how it can be a really tricky aspect of traveling in a country where you might not know the culture or language. And it's the same for people who are vegans or vegetarians, or perhaps those who want kosher food, right? Or gluten-free. These particular types of dietary requirements are not very commonly found in the mainstream restaurants, but I think in time it will change. So thank you, Nanda, for your question.
Okay, thank you, Sensei, for your explanation. It's very amazing.
Thank you. Any more questions? All this talk of food is making me hungry. I haven't had lunch yet. So anyway, any more questions? Can you send the record of our lesson to us by email? I think Kumiko-san will do that. So yes, of course, we can do that. Also, Fajardo's question about exchange programs. You will see that in the chat box, Kumiko-san has put a message there saying, please contact your university exchange office or email us at kokusai@ml.wakayama.ac.jp. Okay. The first in will be able to come. So rush, get your application in quickly. We look forward to welcoming you soon. Anything else? I see someone waving at me. I'll wave back to you. Anyone else? So you probably want to know, what's it like in Japan at the moment? This week, it's 33 degrees every day. It's humid. It will probably rain every day on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Staying indoors is useful, or going to the beach is quite useful here. So there's a beach close by in Shirahama. I think that's what I might do this weekend. What else is there that you might find interesting? There's lots of festivals on at the moment, but with coronavirus, it's still very slow to start up. Okay, we see that Milan has asked a question. How does one start a career in Japan? Well, that question has hundreds of multiple possible answers, right? I think the first one is perhaps learning to speak in Japanese. That might help first. If you can do that, it's the biggest mountain to climb. If you can read, write, and speak Japanese, you open many, many doors for you. So study hard, memorize all your kanji, come to Japan, practice, build your CV, come on an exchange to Japan is probably the first. Most foreigners who have lived long-term in Japan come to Japan in the first place because they've come here either to do a language course or they've come here as an exchange student at a university. Then they love it so much, they meet a Japanese man or woman, they marry them, they have children. 30 years later, they're still here. So that might be you too, Milan, if you come to Japan. So thank you for your question. Anyone else? You might be wondering how difficult it is to learn Japanese. Take it from me, my own example. My Japanese language is very poor. Luckily, I do most of what I need to do in English. It's very, very challenging, but it's also my fault because I just need to work harder at it. So Albina wants to eat ramen. Thank you, Albina. I'm sorry I can't give you any ramen right now, but maybe if you come here, we can have ramen together. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. I think with that said, we could probably conclude this session. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for listening. Be sure to join us for the next 3 days. Today's Monday in Japan, so Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and Friday. Oh, gomenasai, I forgot about Friday, but you must come on Friday because there's more in store. My colleague Nicholas Sensei will talk about his experience in Japan. Husna Sensei will give you lots of tips on how to adapt to living in Japan. And most of all, the highlight will be Kumiko-san cooking Japanese cuisine. If you miss that, you will miss out on one of the best sessions of this summer school. So with that said, thank you, everybody. Hope to see you in Wakayama soon. Bye-bye.